As a young man, Ted Williams had one goal. He wanted the fans who cheered for him to one day pass him on the street and say, "There goes Ted Williams, the greatest hitter who ever lived."
It was like the star came onto the center stage.
Today, the man who wrote the book on hitting selects his top 20 hitters of all time.
Joe DiMaggio was a fellow that had more confidence.
Willie Mays is the best ball player I have ever seen.
From baggy flannels to double mitts, from the dead ball era to the rabbit ball era, you'll see why Ted calls them the 20 greatest hitters. For 19 beautiful summers, Ted Williams held court right here at Fenway Park. The Swing King, as he was called in one movie, the Splendid Splinter, as he was known to most sports fans, Ted Williams took the art of hitting and made it a science, and took the science of hitting and made it an art. Hello, I'm Al Troutwig. Ted Williams is arguably the greatest hitter of all time. And I say arguably because anytime you compile a list of the greatest in any sport, you're bound to start an argument. But that's exactly what Ted Williams is about to do, because he's put together his list of the greatest hitters of all time, and he has some impressive numbers to back up his opinions. Ted was the last player in the major leagues to hit above 400, hitting 406 in 1941. He had a lifetime batting average of 344, hit 521 home runs, and had almost 1,900 RBIs in his 19 years in the big leagues. The numbers would have been higher had Ted not taken time out from professional ball to serve as a fighter pilot in 2 wars. 6 times he won the American League batting title during his career with the Boston Red Sox and became a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1966. Ted relished discussions about hitting. He studied hitting. He loved to hit. He lived to hit. His intensity awed the baseball world. His talent sparked his teammates and instilled fear in his rivals. To say that Ted Williams wrote the book on hitting is no exaggeration. He really did. In 1970, he wrote The Science of Hitting, a collection of thoughts, theories, diagrams, and instructions detailing how the art of hitting a baseball could be analyzed like a science. In it, he examines the best pitches to hit, how to time the swing, the best way to stand, and paints his famed box of baseballs that indicated what Ted called his happy zone, the location of a pitch he needed to hit to be a 400 hitter. For serious batsmen, the book became their Bible.
When I finally started playing baseball and started to wonder why I did certain things out there, you know, I decided I'd go to the library and get this book and read this book. And I was sitting there and reading this book. Even then, at I don't know, 13, I read the book, but it didn't really register, you know? But some of the things that I had read in the book, I guess subconsciously had stuck. And as I went on through my high school career and I started to play baseball and I started doing things and I couldn't understand why I did them, boom, I go back to the book. And finally, I bought my own book. I bought my own book. It was like $4.95. And I remember I started highlighting certain phrases, certain things in there that I thought was going to be important for me to understand. And when I got to college, you know, all of a sudden you start to hear guys say, what kind of pitch did you hit, and where was it, and boom, I go back to the book.
I still have that book in my library at home. I know there are major league players even today, you know, even the major league players today that still carry it around.
The one thing the book gave me, it gave me the incentive to really understand what it takes to be a successful hitter. And believe me, it's sitting on a shelf, on the 3rd shelf in my book room, and when I need it, I go get it.
For Ted's newest book, Ted Williams' Hit List, Ted has put his theories to use to identify the players he believes to be the 20 greatest hitters of all time.
We researched every hitter that I could think of. Every hitter that I'd ever heard is a great hitter. And we had a research team that wouldn't quit. We had some formulas that were absolutely foolproof. I'm going to give to you real quick that they're using now and they never used them before. And one is percentage of times on first base, which means the percentage of times he got on base per time at bat. certainly a very important thing. And the fellow that gets a lot of walks isn't given enough credit. Some guy hits 360, the other guy hits 330, but you put his walks in there and he's a 380 hitter, getting on base. So that's a very important factor that is entwined with this formula that we have, because we give a lot of credit for that. And then, of course, slugging percentage, which means what did you do every time you hit the ball? Was it a single plus, a double plus, or even more?
After writing the book, Ted wrote invitations, inviting the greatest players alive to come and join him at the Ted Williams Hitters Hall of Fame for a weekend-long induction celebration.
Well, feeling great, everything going great. All right.
It's a tremendous honor to be picked by someone like Ted Williams to be a part of one of 20 of the greatest hitters in the game. And I feel very strongly that there is no one more qualified than he.
When the greatest student of the art of hitting a baseball in the history of the game decides to pick the people he thinks are the 20 greatest hitters in history, and he includes me in it, that's got to be the ultimate compliment.
Hitting is Ted's religion, and his goal in life is to spread the gospel, which is why on February 9th, 1994, he opened the Ted Williams Museum. That day at a celebrity-filled event in front of his disciples, Ted dedicated his museum to the sport and its place in American life.
This museum, we hope, is going to enlighten people about baseball. It's going to get their interest to where they want to learn more about it.
What started as a dedication for the museum became a tribute to Ted himself.
So I will say that some people like to set goals, and Ted did this years and years ago. He was quoted as saying, as I read in the newspaper, he wanted to be known as the greatest hitter that ever played baseball. From 1936 to the present day, I can truthfully say I have never seen a better hitter than Ted Williams.
And it was on that day that Ted first announced his Hitters Hall of Fame.
We're going to have a Hitters Hall of Fame. We think that's a very important addition, because if you were to ask 50 of the most or 100 of the most learned people in baseball history, you'd have a hell of an argument trying to pick out the greatest hitters in baseball, because all of them would come back and say, well, what about this guy? And what about this guy? But we have a secret formula that we apply to all, and we have tons of years of experience of people that saw a lot of the great players. And so we think we got a pretty good handle on when we put the names of those greatest hitters, it'll be pretty hard to argue against it.
Because of number 9, this area of Fenway Park in right field used to be known as Williamsburg. Here, 502 feet from home plate, sits a lonely red seat. It marks the spot for one of Ted Williams' 521 career home runs. Still, to this day, the longest ever hit here at Fenway to right field. When we come back to the house that Ted built, we'll finally get a look at his list of the 20 greatest hitters of all time.
Programs. Limited edition programs.
1 year to the day after opening the Ted Williams Museum, Ted opened his Elite Hitters Hall of Fame.
I do it.
Morning. Mrs. Bush. How are you, sir? One of my favorite women. Oh, I know Frank Robinson. I know who you are. Hey! Oh, thank you very much.
The players on the 20 greatest hitters list were to be inducted during the Hall's opening ceremony. The induction took place in a tent at the site of the museum in Hernando, Florida, and Bob Costas was the master of ceremonies.
Lest I forget, before I go any further, I have a message for all of you from Darryl Strawberry. Get receipts. Ted has already worked out his list of the 20 greatest hitters of all time to be enshrined in the beautiful new museum. Now, this is always the subject of debate. That's what baseball is about, differences of opinion. You have your perspective, I have mine, and Ted worked out a very complicated formula. I can't explain it all. But you either had to be a great hitter in some objective way, 3,000 hits, 500 homers, a slugging percentage around 600. Or you could be a very mediocre hitter who knew a lot of great fishing spots. On to the 20 greatest hitters of all time. Some of whom are here, most of whom are here. Let us start with number 20 on the list. As I mentioned earlier, Ralph Kiner is second only to Babe Ruth in home run frequency with those 369 lifetime home runs and the 7 National League home run championships, either won or shared in a string of 7 consecutive years. Still a very popular broadcaster with the New York Mets, Ralph Kiner.
Well, I saw him, and he could hit a ball a ton. He could hit it in the air. And I don't think Kiner has ever really got the credit as a great hitter that he should have had.
The player of most recent vintage on the list is Mike Schmidt. Mike. There he is. That looked like his 500th home run in Pittsburgh a few years ago. And there are all his teammates out to greet him. And he wound up with 548 lifetime before retiring in 1989. He said he wasn't emotional, but look at him there.
He was supreme, almighty supreme for several years in the home run department in the National League. And hell of a player. Hell of a hitter.
Number 18, roll it for Frank Robinson. Ted never played against Frank Robinson except in all-star games. There's a comment that Ted made about each of the players on the list, and he said of Frank, of all the players I've heard about and seen, Frank Robinson hasn't really gotten as high on the list of great players as he should have. He has been underrated, but not today.
He was crowding the plate. He was aggressive. And I think of all the players that I've heard about and seen, I think at times that Frank Robinson hasn't really got as high on the niche of the greatest players as he should have. He certainly, in my book, ranks as one of the greatest offensive players.
Number 17 on the list, a great Detroit Tiger who once hit 403 in a single season and came back 2 years later to hit 393. He was a 342 career hitter. Right-handed batter, hit 342. Harry Howman is number 17 on the list.
When I first come to big league, 19 years old, I got a chance to talk to a lot of the great players that were in Detroit, around Cleveland, even players around Chicago, and on our own team, the Boston Red Sox, who had seen quite a little bit of Howman. Now, Howman was a very personable man. Everybody used to say that I heard say anything about him. What a hitter. Now, he hit 400 once, and he has a 340 lifetime average, and that tells you a lot.
Mel Ott is number 16 on the list. And for those of you too young to remember, and I never saw him firsthand, but I remember the film clips, take a look at that distinctive batting style. Like Sadaharu Oh, who holds the Japanese record for lifetime home runs, and come to think of it, like Shotzi, always lifted that leg at the plate. 511 lifetime home runs and a lifetime batting average of 304. Broke into the big leagues with the New York Giants at the age of 17 and played more than 20 years with them, the last segment of it as their player manager, Mel Ott.
Of all the hitters in the history of baseball, he probably accommodated the place that he played and developed a style that would blend in with that environment. Short right field fence. He learned how to pop them into right field and pull the ball. Now, that's the hardest thing to do, hitting. Pull the ball, get it in the air. And still, he did it to the tune of 500-plus home runs, and he wasn't a very big guy.
Number 15 on the list, is Johnny Mize, the big cat. He had devastating years with the Cardinals and with the Giants. And then, toward the end of his career, he was a pinch hitter deluxe on those great Yankee teams that won 5 consecutive world championships from 1949 through 1953. He had 51 home runs in 1947. He tied Ralph Kiner for the National League lead that year, and he was that rarity among power hitters. He seldom struck out. A contact hitter who nonetheless hit well over 300 home runs lifetime and had a batting average of .312 for his career. Johnny Mize.
Johnny Mize with his bat. He was a valuable man on the ball club. He had keen eyes. Very seldom he ever swung a bad ball. I was impressed immediately about he didn't swing and miss too often. I was also impressed that he didn't swing at bad balls. And he still hit a ton of home runs. And 51 years, I always thought that he was one of the very best hitters I saw, and I did see Johnny Mize.
Number 14 on the list, Al Simmons. Bucket foot Al, as they called him, used to bail out and step toward third base. Didn't prevent him from hitting .390 in 1931 for Connie Mack's Philadelphia A's. That was one of the great teams of all time. They won the American League 10 in 3 straight years, 29, 30, and 31. And Al had a lifetime batting average of .334. Al Simmons.
Not many players impressed me any more than Al Simmons, and I didn't see Al Simmons even close to his height as a player. He was pinch hitting, playing once in a while, and he looked dangerous just looking at him with that bat in his hand.
Number 13 on the list is Tris Speaker. Who knows how many American League batting titles he might have won had he not been a contemporary of Ty Cobb. Cobb won 9 in a row, and then Speaker broke that string in 1916, and then Cobb won 3 more in succession. Speaker had a lifetime batting average in excess of .340. He still holds the all-time record for doubles with nearly 800 of them. One of the great defensive outfielders of all time, Tris Speaker.
Tris Speaker, you know, was a .400 hitter. And when I came to the big leagues, he was talked about as much as anybody. Even though a young guy named DiMaggio put his stats up on the board. But Speaker, in his day, was recognized as an absolute super player.
In a moment, Ted Williams' celebrated list rolls on with the Mick.
Against the Minnesota Twins. First game at 1. Here's the payoff pitch. It's a hit. There it goes. It's out of here.
Number 12 on the list is Mickey Mantle. Broke in 1951 as a 19-year-old out of Commerce, Oklahoma, which is where the nickname the Commerce Comet comes from. Immediate successor to Joe DiMaggio, and continuing the tradition of the Roots, the Garys, DiMaggios. And here's Mickey.
I can't say enough about Mickey Mantle, the hitter. He was devastating right-handed, absolutely devastating, and left-handed. He'd scare everybody out of the ballpark. I don't think there'll ever be a switch hitter. And that's saying a lot when you say ever. I don't think there'll ever be a switch hitter that had the power on both sides of Mickey Mantle.
Just ahead of Mickey on the list is Hank Greenberg, a career slugging percentage of .605. Hit 58 home runs, and I believe it was 1938, which was as close. He had 58 one year. Jimmy Fox also had 58, as close as anybody came to Ruth's record until Roger Maris broke it in 1961. Batting average well in excess of 300 for his career, and over 300 lifetime home runs in a relatively short career, only played 12, 13 years. But he was a devastating player during that period of time. The great first baseman of the Tigers, Hank Greenberg, and his son Steve Greenberg, here to his son.
He was the type of person that reached out, and he sort of took me under his wing, and I had some big theories on hitting, and they were basically theories I learned from Hank Greenberg. And I jumped from 23 home runs my first year in the major leagues to 51 my second. So they did work pretty well.
He was always recognized as a smart hitter. And the old saying about Greenberg is if you made him look bad, don't throw too many more of those because he'd lay for it. And one of the most personable guys that was ever in the big leagues, one of the really and our book substantiates it even more than he's recognized. The formula that we've used is that he was truly one of the real sluggers in baseball history.
Ted Williams was good friends with Hank Greenberg, and Ted says he probably talked more about hitting with Hank than anybody else. And if there's one thing Ted could do even better than hit, it was talk about hitting. And that's exactly what he'll do with Tony Gwynn when we continue in a moment.
And I'm going to predict right this show. Well, how many homers did you hit last?
I hit 12, which is a lot for me.
All right. I'm going to predict you're going to start hitting more home runs.
Well, I thank you very much. I hope so.
The Ted Williams Museum is devoted to acknowledging not only the legendary hitters of the past, but the great hitters of the present as well. Each year, Ted and the museum hand out awards to the top hitters in the major leagues. And with the opening of the new Hitters Wing at the museum, the first modern hitters to be awarded were Jeff Bagwell and Tony Gwynn.
Jeff Bagwell of the Houston Astros.
With a phenomenal slugging percentage of .750, Bagwell led the league in total bases and extra base hits in 1994.
Tony Gwynn.
Tony Gwynn's year was no less outstanding, as he was on target to possibly become the first man to hit 400 in a season since Ted Williams did it over 50 years ago. The strike put an end to that aspiration, but Gwynn did have the chance to sit down with Ted and talk hitting. What more could a lifetime .336 batter ask for?
In order to have that 400 year, which is a wonderful year, everything has to fall in place. You have to have, you know, you get cycles of good hitting, good pitching, you know. Everything has to fall in place. Good years, bad, everything has to come in place. But a hitter like Tony has a much better chance of doing it, say, than a big swinger that misses a lot. Well, how many homers did you hit last?
I hit 12, which is a lot for me.
All right. I'm going to predict you're going to start hitting more home runs.
Well, I thank you very much. I hope so.
And certainly don't change what you're doing.
I'm not.
But take more advantage of the count.
Exactly.
More advantage of the type pitcher you're hitting against. Crowd the plate once in a while, because you know you can pull the ball better in. You can hit the ball hard when it's over the plate through the middle. Yeah. I mean, if you're underneath the pitch, what are you, generally early or late?
If you're underneath the pitch? Well, see, that's different with me. I say late.
I say late, too.
Okay. Well, see, I hit the ball the other way.
That's all right.
I hit the ball the other way a lot.
I know you do.
Your lifetime batting average is .333. You've won 5 batting titles. And when Ted Williams said, now, do you swing all the way through in this situation, or do you push at the ball? You had the look of a schoolboy, hoping he would have the right answer, or the teacher would slap his hand with a ruler.
No question. No question about it. You know, and it's funny because, you know, lots of people look towards Ted Williams as their teacher, whether if they were fortunate enough to work under him or do like I did, reading books and stuff. And, I mean, anybody else ask me that question, there's no doubt. I'd say, yeah, I try to stay behind the ball and block the ball up, but Ted's sitting there. I had to think about it for a minute, and I was a bit nervous. But, you know, I only wish that other hitters had the opportunity to sit down and talk to them about their own personal situations, because you can learn so much just from talking to people. And he's one of the greatest hitters of all time. And this whole day for me, you know, being around guys like Mays, Mantle, Musial, all those guys, it's been, I mean, as a hitter who continually tries to improve, it's the greatest thing in the world to sit down and talk to Stan Musial and ask him, you know, how did you do what you did? And it is, I just can't even begin to describe to you how exciting it's been for me. If it wasn't for the things that these guys were able to accomplish on a baseball field, I wouldn't even have wanted to be a baseball player. I wouldn't even have wanted to be, you know, the best that I could be. I mean, there are lots of guys here. If you want to learn, all you have to do is listen. You don't even have to go and talk to them. You just sit quiet and listen. You can hear the story.
And now let's listen in on the announcement of the list's top 10 hitters.
And you know, if what I said before was true about Willie Mays, why should I get in the way with any kind of facts or observations? Just watch him play. Just watch how much fun it was to watch Willie Mays play. But I will add this one thing. He admitted to me a few months ago, we were at another affair, and he admitted, you know, I always did select a cap a size or two too big. So when I got going, it would sail off. Because what the hell? The people came for a show.
He always
always had the bat cocked, ready to go, and he always waited the last second to commit himself. And that's why he was so good at hitting the breaking ball. And he could pick up the spin on the ball. And he knew a breaking ball, he always had his hands in the right position to adjust.
Well, when you say Willie Mays, you got to think of DiMaggio. When you say DiMaggio, you got to think of Willie Mays. They were two super players.
They were linked for years and years in the National League, and they're just that close on Ted's list. At number 9 is the all-time leader in home runs, the all-time leader in RBIs. He's second in runs scored all time. He had 8 seasons where he topped 40 home runs, and eventually he did the unthinkable. He broke the most revered record in baseball history when he passed Babe Ruth, when he hit number 715 on April 8, 1974 in Atlanta. And he wound up with 755 lifetime, number 1, and perhaps certainly in our lifetime, unreachable. Hank Aaron.
Hank Aaron, you gotta be honest with yourself, and you say, well, he's the home run king. He was a great hitter, had great ability. I remember one time I told one of our pitchers, I said, you're going to pitch against a great hitter today. We were playing spring training against Hank Aaron. I said, I want you throwing sliders and curves all the time. First 2 times up, he hits ground balls to shortstop. Now I told him the 4th time. Now I said, when he gets up there again, keep throwing him that slider and curve. And when you get 1 strike, boom, throw a fastball as hard as you can up in the air, just to see what'll happen. Well, he got him out the first time, second time, third time, and here's this 4th time up, and here a couple of sliders. Then he threw his best fastball, and he had a pretty good fastball. And Mr. Aaron hit a blue darter. That's an old expression of baseball. He hit one that went out of the park like a shot, like a rifle shot. Boy, did that convince me of one thing. Hank Aaron could rip a fastball.
Number 8 on the list, out of Pickens County, South Carolina, shoeless Joe Jackson. Because of his alleged involvement in the Black Sox scandal of 1919, he has never been formally inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame, but he is number 8 on the list in the Ted Williams Hitters Hall of Fame. His last year, as it turned out, before the judgment by Judge Landis in the scandal was handed down, was 1920. He hit 380 in his final year. He hit 356 lifetime. Only Rogers Hornsby and Ty Cobb have higher lifetime batting averages. He hit 408 in 1911. Joe Jackson.
I wish I'd have seen him. That's all I can say. I wish I could have seen Joe Jackson.
Coming up, it's the heart of the order. The top of the list of Ted Williams' 20 greatest hitters of all time.
All the years that Ted Williams reigned as the greatest hitter in the American League, the guy who paralleled him in the National League was Stan Musial, as I mentioned earlier, a lifetime batting average of 331. And in fact, that was always his answer. People said to him, Stan, you're always smiling, you're always playing that harmonica, you strike that stance, you're happy-go-lucky. He said, hey, pal, if you had a lifetime batting average of 331, you'd be laughing too. He had over 316 consecutive times. And fittingly, had 2 base hits in his very last big league game for the Cardinals in 1963. Stan the man, Stan Musial.
Stan at that time was a quiet guy. He'd just walk up there and hit the ball and run. And you couldn't play him no way. He'd hit the ball to left field good, and he'd pull the ball to right field good. He was just an all-around ball player.
Well, I can only give the example that I told my kid. For 5 years before we went to the Hall of Fame, and Stan Musial was inducted, I kept talking about Stan Musial. Stan Musial. Went to a banquet where Stan Musial was there. My son was listening to me, and I brought up Musial so darn much that when we finally did get to the Hall of Fame, why, we had the ceremonies, and Musial was recognized and praised. And my kid, after it was all over, he said, do you think he was as good a hitter as you were? I said, yes, I do. And all honestly, I think he was.
One of the names that has tumbled down the corridors of time in baseball history and is even more in the spotlight today with the movie and the book. It wasn't just what he accomplished, and what he accomplished was overwhelming with the 12 batting titles and the 367 lifetime average, and 3 times topping 400 and nearly 900 stolen bases. But it was the passion and the ferocity with which he played the game that defined not only Ty Cobb, but the style of baseball around that time, around the turn of the century.
I didn't see Ty Cobb very much, but I had a chance to visit with him quite often, several times. And of course, the subject did get to hitting. He was an altogether different type of hitter than I was. But no matter how you break his record, dead ball, live ball, any way you do, average, time on base, you're compelled to put him in. Even though he didn't hit very many home runs, you're compelled to put him in the greatest hitters that ever played this game.
There's no way in the world that Ted could leave the Yankee Clipper off the list. He puts number 5 at number 5, Joe D., who in the year that Ted hit 406, the last man to top 400, that very same year, another incredible achievement, that was the year that Joe DiMaggio hit in 56 consecutive games. And as you may know, he was stopped one night in Cleveland, took a couple of great plays by Ken Keltner at third base to do it, and then he went on to hit in the next 16 in a row. And he had a 61-game hitting streak as a youngster in the Pacific Coast League. His name became synonymous with grace and elegance on the ball field, and that's something that numbers alone can't capture. Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee pitcher.
Well, he was such a great player and did everything with such class that I have such high esteem for him as a player and the way he conducted everything that I couldn't admire him more. He's as good a right-hand hitter as ever lived. I know that.
Boy, oh boy, what a hitter Rogers Hornsby was. When you talk about batting average and power, with over 300 career home runs, topped the 40 home run mark in some seasons, lifetime batting average of 358. Rogers Hornsby, before Fox, and even a little bit before Ruth, because he started out before him, and before Ted Williams, before Lou Gehrig, this guy might have been baseball's perfect combination of power and average. In one 5-year stretch, he hit over 400 3 times and averaged 403 for the 5 years, which included the single highest batting average since 1900, which is considered the modern history of baseball. He hit 424 in 1924. Rogers Hornsby.
Well, there's another guy. I think real quick that he's recognized by more people as the greatest right-hand hitter that baseball ever saw. But I say that with some reservation because I saw DiMaggio, and I did see Hornsby hit, and he was great. Super.
Ted was very fond of Jimmy Fox, who treated him well when Ted was just a raw rookie. But even if he hadn't, pretty hard to ignore the accomplishments of Double X, a 325 lifetime batting average, and for years and years, his 534 career home runs were the second highest all time, behind the great Bambino. Jimmy Fox, who had 58 home runs in 1932 and then hit 50 in 1938. Jimmy Fox.
Jimmy Fox, I saw hit, and boy, I'll tell you, you're talking about some truly great hitters.
And a pair of Yankees ranked number 2 and obviously number 1. In the runner-up spot, the pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, 2,130 consecutive games. And if it's possible to be overshadowed, despite what he did, obviously he played in the shadow of Babe Ruth, but 3 times in his career, he had better than 170 RBIs in a season. He drove in 184 in 1931 when he played just a 154-game schedule. Lifetime batting average of 340. He would have hit way over 500 home runs. He was stopped by illness at 493, and that, of course, is what stopped the streak at 2,130. Number 2 on the list, Lou Gehrig.
Well, you put him in the same class. Put him in the same class. How could you be any better than Gehrig or Ruth? You're 2 peas in a pod.
And now to number 1, and I can think of at least one thing that Lou Gehrig has over Babe Ruth, if he has to concede the number 1 spot to him. The movie about Lou Gehrig was terrific. Every movie about Babe Ruth is pretty lousy. But despite that, the Babe's legend endures, and just last week, The 100th anniversary of his birth was celebrated all around the country. And for someone to still be that vivid in the public imagination, so that little kids have no trouble identifying a picture or a film clip of him. He is arguably the most famous, most powerful in terms of persona and popular athlete in any sport in the history of this country. 12 times the American League's home run champion, a career slugging percentage of .690. Babe Ruth. And his daughter, Julia Ruth Stevens, here to accept.
5 words. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth. The one and only Babe Ruth. I'll tell you, he is the most recognized sports hero in American sports, and he is by far the most prevalent name ever mentioned when it comes to baseball.
One of the great things about Fenway Park is that on off days during the regular season, the Red Sox will actually let you come in and take a tour of this great old ballpark. So if you're ever in the vicinity of Yawkey Way, come inside the stadium and see if you can hear the strong echoes of the past. Or better still, take a seat and try to imagine what it was like in September of 1960 when Ted Williams stepped to the plate for the very last time.
And they remain standing here for the most part at Fenway Park as Williams hit probably for the last time in a Boston uniform in this ballpark. There's a drive to deep right center. This may be gone. Fred way back there watching. Home run, Ted Williams. Well, if you had written it that way, nobody would believe it, so I even try. Ted Williams has hit his 29th home run, the 521st of his Major League career.
When he played, Ted Williams' dream was that one day he would be able to walk down the street and hear someone say, "There goes the greatest hitter of all time." Now, you might say, in discussing Ted's list of the top 20 all-time greatest hitters, that really it's a list of hitters 2 through 21. And you might be right. You might also be able to say that in considering the list of the greatest baseball fans of all time, Ted Williams would have to be considered for the #1 slot as well. After all, that's what the Ted Williams Museum and his top 20 all-time hitters list is all about. And going back to our original thought, maybe this didn't start an argument after all.
And I hope someday that this is a reflection on truly what a great game this is, how important it is to America. This, hopefully, will be a little bit of a stepping stone somewhere along the line that's going to get a kid to keep going, inspiring, keep him going. Even this museum, if he gets a chance to see it, I'm sure will. And he'll say, boy, I know I can do it. It may be just a little inspiration that he needs to keep him going, and maybe someday he will be a big leaguer.
Come on, Ron, we'd like to see you.
If I were to take a young kid and try to teach him the way I think he should hit, I would incorporate almost everything Ted Williams had in his stroke or spoke about in his book. I think we all kind of hold Ted as kind of the godfather of hitting, the whole idea of hitting in general. What Williams say about it? Or, if it's hitting, you want to know how Williams felt about it.
Ted Williams was a credit to baseball and a credit to himself, because there will never be another Ted Williams, just like there will never be another Babe Ruth.
And I think it's important to note that if modesty didn't forbid, Ted would have to be no worse than #2 on the list. Maybe we concede the #1 spot to Babe Ruth.
Everybody stood around watching big batting practice, like they used to take to watch Ruth and Gehrig and the Murderers Row.
To see Ted Williams and the electrifying appeal he had to crowds, and his awesome ability to hit a baseball, his personality, his flamboyance. There was only one Ted Williams, and I grew up idolizing him and admiring him, and
as did the most famous hitter in the history of Yale University.
It's self-confidence. His first, I'm told that at his first spring training, one of our stars here today, Bobby Dorr, said to him, "Wait till you see Jimmy Fox hit." Ted Ray said, "Well, wait till Fox sees me hit." We all remember this. I know all these guys do. He was hitting 3.995, the statistical equivalent to an even 400, as the season ended with a doubleheader. And to protect the average, Joe Cronin wanted Ted to sit it out, and he refused. And he went 6 for 8 to finish at 406. Another. John Wayne in a baseball uniform. And here's to the grandest hitter of all and one of America's greatest heroes who ever lived, Ted Williams. We are your friends and we love you dearly.